This episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast is brought to you in partnership with KWS.
Right from the start of the fire, water was the biggest issue, and that's when farmers got involved using slurry tankers, sprayer bowsers, anything which would contain decent volumes of water. And they've got down to having to go to Whitby and sucking it out of Whitby Harbour, because the fire site now is approximately 8 kilometres long, covering somewhere near the thick end of 4,000 acres.
Farmers and firefighters battle a huge wildfire blazing in Yorkshire. Pig and poultry pollution under scrutiny, but do the allegations add up? Hay and straw is being imported from France to help drought-hit UK livestock producers, and tractor drivers are urged to make sure they drive safely. Welcome to the Farmers Weekly podcast. I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
And it's straight to our top story. As you heard at the top of the programme, farmers have been helping firefighters battle a huge wildfire across thousands of acres of the Yorkshire Moors. The fire broke out earlier this month and was still raging this week as farmers carted slurry tankers and bowsers of water to help fight the flames. Yorkshire farmer Will Terry is among those on the scene, and I caught up with Will earlier and asked him what it was like.
Fire started on a piece of moorland, and it was controlled by fire service and farmers, and it sat there. And the big problem was that there was pockets of peat which were still burning. The site is part of a World War II training exercise area, so there's live ammunition from World War II buried in the site, which the fire has been exploding. It's just been massive.
Fortunately, Will, there's been no loss of human life so far, but the logistics of fighting this fire have been absolutely horrendous as well.
The logistics have been immense because the fire site now is approximately 8 kilometres long, apocalyptic really, covering somewhere near the thick end of 4,000 acres, maybe more, including surrounding forests, and then Farndale's High Moor and Low Moor and Sneaton Moor. When the fire took hold on Monday, what can happen is the fire seats itself in the peat, burns underground and pop up, or you can have live embers which blow across fire breaks, and it took hold. The weather conditions were probably 23, 24 degrees air temperature and a high wind, and it totally fueled the fire, made it move very, very, very quickly.
And local farmers have been queuing up with slurry tankers, with bowsers full of water, trying to get that water to the fire crews.
Yeah, absolutely. Right from the start of the fire, water was the biggest issue because all the things like the becks and streams were all dry, so there was no chance of being able to get direct water on site. So it was having to be led into for firefighting, and that's when farmers got involved using slurry tankers, sprayer bowsers, anything which would contain decent volumes of water. Basically, all local ponds and reservoirs have been emptied. It's also put a strain on local water supplies too, and they've got down to having to go to Whitby and sucking it out of Whitby Harbour and out of the River Esk.
It's absolutely unbelievable, sucking water out of Whitby Harbour to go and fight the fire. Will, you've also, I understand, managed to rescue a flock of sheep from the flames.
Yeah, we were controlling a fire, and it cornered a flock of 30 and 40 ewes and lambs, and by the time we got them out of danger, it was singeing our whiskers. It was right on us, was the fire. It was a close call, was that. The really bizarre thing and the strange thing was we were stood at a friend's property trying to protect that. And an hour before the fire front actually reached us, it was thick smoke. You couldn't see anything. But a absolute belt of insects came out of the fire. Just like a mass evacuation of everything from ladybirds to moths, everything just came out of the area. Almost if nature understood what was happening and how to avoid it. It was sort of biblical. It was very surreal, the whole thing. The smoke was acrid, thick, you couldn't see a thing. But yet all these insects came out. And it was about an hour before the fire came through.
Well, look, Will, you take care there in Yorkshire. Thank you for talking to us here on the Farmers Weekly podcast. Let's hope that things start going the right way very, very soon. That's Will Terry, local farmer, helping to fight the fire there up in Yorkshire. Hugh, this moorland fire, absolutely huge, absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, it's pretty awful, and it's really weird because this is actually a really, this is a huge event. It's gone over several thousand acres of North Yorkshire moorland, or North York Moors moorland, Fylingdales Moor and the neighbouring moor, and it's hardly blipped on the national agenda. I think it has locally, and obviously for the local people involved. And since it's really kicked on, because the fire actually started back on the 11th of August, and it was in a fairly unmanaged bit of woodland, and then it spilt out onto the moor. And then apparently on the bank holiday weekend, this last weekend, it really accelerated. And of course, the wind's been blowing. It's tinder dry, although there has been some rainfall since, and it's just gone mad.
There have, of course, been other wildfires this summer. We've seen them in Scotland. We've seen them in Wales. Louise, you were saying before we came on air, as it were, that this is a sign of things to come, hotter, drier weather.
Well, exactly that. I mean, if we are looking at a hotter, drier world, then are we going to see more of this type of event? It's now in its third week. There has been, huge efforts to get it under control and sort it out. And well done to the community for coming together to do what needs to be done and to help. That's a good thing. But, should we expect to see more of these sort of events? And if so, what precautions or, what practices need to happen so that everybody is prepared for more of this?
And, I'm surprised it hasn't had wider media coverage as well, because you're talking about World War II ammunition going off underground because it's so hot. You're talking, you heard the incredible story about the insects, a cloud of insects and other creatures coming out from the fire area about an hour before it spread. Amazing.
Yeah, it is. Perhaps it's because all the farmers are involved and they're doing such an amazing job that there's some sort of news blackout. I don't know. But no, there has been. And look, joking apart, the response from the farming community, not just the local farming community, when you speak to people like Will and other people that live around there, has been amazing. But it's also the people that have come in with tractors and tankers from 3-4 hours away to cart water, because they suddenly realised last weekend that if they didn't get the water in the right places, this was just going to roll and rage, and it would run into effectively start to really potentially affect settlement. And of course, the other thing you've got going on with this moorland, it's peat. So if it gets really hot, the peat soil, the fire goes down into the soil. And there's still, even though there's been some rainfall, there is still areas where the peat is still on fire. And that's why, as you said, some of these World War II munitions that were just dumped up on the hill 70, 80 years ago, that's why they're suddenly going off, because the fire's gone down 2 or 3 foot into the peat soil and is setting them off. So it's a pretty horrendous event. I mean, it sounds like they've got most of it contained now. And the other irony of this whole thing as well is that obviously a lot of the moorland lobby groups, and whether it's the moorland sort of lobby groups along the conservation lines, or whether it's the farming lines with the NFU and people like that, have obviously, we've been saying for ages, I put my NFU hat on there briefly, that, you've got to manage this moorland properly. You can't just leave it to go into some utopian wild, just left to grow raggly-taggly however you want. You've actually got to manage moorland. And this illustrates that even when, and this particular piece of moor, even though this fire has been pretty horrendous and it's run really quickly, it's actually been under really tight management for the last 20 years. There was a huge fire up there about 2003, and since then they've had it under fairly tight management. So the whole rewilding idea that you should just leave moors to go mad, which a lot of moorland is being done, and Natural England are restricting the amount of grazing. They're saying to farmers, you've just got to let it go. Had this been one of those where it had a huge fuel source on top, the outcome could have been so much worse. So it calls all that into question. And it basically says all of the stuff, the farming groups, the upland groups, the people that live and work this land, that understand this landscape, all of they have been saying it is true. It's all very well for these groups to say, oh, this is utopian and this needs to happen, but they haven't got a Scooby of practical experience. And this is what happens when things... Well, this isn't what happens. This is the mild version. Had you done what they want and let it all go to rewild heaven and go mad, then the outcome would have been 10 times worse, 100 times worse, because of the amount of fuel that would have been just left on top unmanaged.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
Hi, it's Kate Cobbold, Head of Product Management and Agri-Service at KWS. Today I want to talk to you about a new way of thinking at KWS, Productivity Squared. Productivity Squared realises the potential of our varieties. We know that yield is king and directly linked to profitability, so ensuring you have the right variety that can maximise output is key. But Productivity Squared is much more than that. It's breeding varieties that have resilience, are competitive, and will sustainably meet the demands of farmers and downstream partners. So how do we do that? Well, Productivity Squared isn't just a slogan. It's a bold statement of intent to deliver not just incremental gains in our varieties, but quantum improvements in yield and efficiency to deliver long-term sustainability on farm. We're investing today in tomorrow's super varieties because the crops of the future need to do more than just grow well. They need to grow smarter. At its core, Productivity Squared is about ensuring the varieties you select meet the demands not just of today, but for tomorrow as well, combining genetic innovation with practical flexibility to help you stay ahead of changing climates, markets, and regulations.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
Now, pollution from pig and poultry production is not only polluting our rivers, it's damaging the wider landscape too. So says a report commissioned by the Wildlife Trusts. The study says a cocktail of fertilisers and pesticides used to grow the feed fed to livestock on pig and poultry units is bad for the environment. We'll discuss those claims in a moment, but first I spoke to Barnaby Coop, a Senior Land Use Policy Manager at the Wildlife Trusts.
We're calling for existing regulations to be applied in a smarter and a more cohesive way, so that they're doing the job that we as society need them to do. So, protecting our environment and in particular our rivers. Now, we know these improvements won't be made overnight. Farmers will need support and guidance to improve along that regulated pathway. But this is, as you say, this is a really complex issue, and it just needs to have that fully system-wide approach to addressing it.
Barnaby, the report also says that the supply chain must play its part in helping farmers make this transition to a more sustainable way of doing things. Have you got any examples of what that might involve?
Yeah, so, the wider supply chain, and by that we're talking about food processors and retailers, we strongly believe that they need to shoulder more responsibility for the environmental risks identified in the findings of our report. It's not fair for them to pay farmers such poor prices for the food they produce and then expect them to be able to invest in the necessary changes needed to mitigate and reduce the environmental risks associated with some of the findings of our report. Farmers need to be paid better and fairer, allowing them to invest in better slurry management, lower impact practices, and reducing the demand for that kind of really high output, cheap feed crops produced in intensive cropping systems, which then head into these systems. Because producing these feed crops in a really, really intensive way, it has been shown to degrade our soils, risk polluting our waterways, and really hinders the recovery of wildlife in the wider countryside.
With this report, the Wildlife Trust is using the phrase cocktail of chemicals when it comes to growing the feed that goes into pig and poultry systems. If we really want to take farmers with us on this journey, as it were, to sustainability, surely we need to be using less emotive language rather than beating farmers over the head. I know a lot of our listeners, when they hear the phrase cocktail of chemicals, they're going to be turned off by that kind of language.
I think the term cocktail of chemicals is, I mean, it's easy to look at that through an emotional lens. And I know I've spoken to many farmers who will get emotional about it either way. You know, there are farmers who are also very passionate about reducing chemical use. But I think when we use the phrase cocktail of chemicals, what we're actually talking about there is quite a kind of phenomenon that is associated when you have lots of different pesticides and different chemicals and artificial fertilizers accumulating in the environment in novel ways. And this is something called the cocktail effect. So actually the language we use here is less about the emotion of it and more about actually highlighting that a lot of the environmental risks associated with these chemicals are not fully understood. And I think that shouldn't just be a concern for conservationists and people interested in nature recovery. It should also be a significant concern for farmers as well. These chemicals are tested and approved under very tight systems, and actually the approach to testing how they interact with other chemicals in the environment is not well understood. So I think, you know, when we talk about cocktail of chemicals, we're coming at it from quite a kind of evidence-based approach rather than trying to tell farmers what they shouldn't do and kind of browbeat farmers. That's absolutely not what we want to do with this report.
So in a nutshell, you're looking for a smarter approach, a more targeted approach. You're not looking to beat farmers over the head and tell them that they've done things wrong, but things need to change.
Absolutely. And it is a really complex issue and there is no easy answers. And that is why one of the recommendations we've made off the back of this report is for government to set up a task force to look at how the impacts associated with the concentration of these units in the wider landscape, which we've identified in the report, can be best managed to minimise those environmental impacts and really fast-track progress towards solutions.
That's Barnaby Coop, Senior Land Use Policy Manager at the Wildlife Trusts, on the impact of UK pig and poultry production on the environment. Well, that report does talk about the River Wye in Herefordshire, and that has been the focus of much attention when it comes to pollution from poultry production. Well, one farmer in the Wye Valley joins us now, Martin Williams, not a poultry producer, but Martin, you have been working for a long time to try and improve farming practices and get on top of the sort of problems that are mentioned in this report. What's your reaction to it?
It's a very good historical document, but I was disappointed by the lack of forward thinking and the lack of actual data on the ground. And I think that's what we've come up against all through this dialogue and all through this issue, is the data keeping up with the progress. And so I felt, yes, every lobby group has an angle, and every person has an opinion, and that's absolutely fine. However, when we're looking for solutions, I don't think there were many within this report, unfortunately.
And you've been working yourself for quite a while now in the Wye Valley, trying to make things better.
Yeah. So I've been working in the Wye for 5-6 years now, because it seemed that we were so high profile and farmers were getting a right bashing from all sides and all and sundry. And we decided on a Thursday night, about this time of year, that we should hold this event with a view to seeing if there was any interest from farmers. Well, it was so busy from all sides that we had to hold 2 events because we filled the venue twice. And so subsequent to that, I've ended up quite involved in trying to look for solutions. And that's what we've tried to do. It was all based on the refocus work that came from Lancaster University, which is around phosphate. And so when that came out, it became apparent that farming needed to drive this agenda and not let others do that. And if we look at history so far since that first meeting, there's been quite a lot of change. We are now on the last stages of putting together a landscape recovery bid. We're successful within that. So we've got 5,000 hectares sitting in a bid. We've got 2,500 waiting to go into it if it should get to around 3. things around supply chain. Avara have been exporting their waste from this vicinity out of the catchment. There are so many things. The dialogue has changed within farming. I run a group with another guy called Steve Clank and Kate Speak Adams and myself called Farm Herefordshire, and we're trying to engage with farmers and enable them to change and be aware of what's going on. And so there's so much has gone on in the Wye Valley in particular over the past 5 years, and no doubt elsewhere.
And Martin, I came down to Herefordshire to one of those early meetings, and if you remember, and then I've followed this issue with interest. And when I look back at some of the articles that I wrote at the time, we were talking about things like phosphate stripping, and I know that Avara was introducing that, where they can extract and recover some of the phosphate so that it doesn't go into the soils and then sometimes into the river. We looked at anaerobic digestion and the role that would have. I'm fairly sure there's a poultry litter compliance scheme that's been set up. And then there was also, I think, a project on the River Lug where they managed to reduce phosphate levels by 1/3. So, yeah, none of these solutions and none of these things are discussed in that report at all, are they?
No, they're not, and it's quite saddening as a farmer to read yet another report. And I've no disrespect for the report at all, and no disrespect for a lobby organisation wanting to have a voice. But when it comes down to facts and data, that's where farming needs to stand up for itself, and that's what we've been trying to do in Herefordshire. And you're quite right, Avara with their export, we've got a river-friendly farming practice which people have signed up to within the catchment. We've got the Avara system where they're exporting and farmers have to comply with how that works. There is a lot of farmer engagement now. Farmers are now asking for specific fertilizers to cut down on their phosphate, but it's becoming more than phosphate now. We're moving into ammonia, we're moving into nitrogen. So it's only a growing piece. So farmers are learning and learning quite quickly. And it's just a matter of time, isn't it, as we pick up the pace. Everyone lives in an Amazon world now where you want something done overnight. Unfortunately, this isn't something that's going to get solved overnight. We're very lucky to have been given in the Wye £1 million from the current government to base some research on soil profiling and soil types and how that reacts. And so there is a lot of work going on, and it would be great to see some of that reflected in this work.
As Herefordshire farmer Martin Williams farming in the River Wye catchment there in Herefordshire.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
Revolutionise your livestock farming with Avent. Handle feed, bedding and manure with ease thanks to our compact loaders. With a vast range of attachments, Avent makes every task quicker and simpler. Enhance your farm's productivity. Search for Avent now.
Want bales up to 22% denser? The New Holland Big Baler High Density delivers more crop per bale, saving you time, fuel and trailer loads. The Smart Shift gearbox gives you a smooth 2-speed startup that's easier on your tractor. And with Loop Master knotters, you get stronger knots and 0 offcuts. For big output and tidy fields, speak to your dealer today.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly podcast. Welcome along wherever you're listening to us from. You can email us podcast@fwi.co.uk. And if you're in the UK itself, you can message us by texting the word farm, followed by your message to 88440. Louise, farming hitting the headlines again this week. What have you seen in the papers?
Yeah, it's constantly there, isn't it, farming? It's a topic that the national media is interested in. So, in the Times today, there's a comment piece by Marion Waters. It's entitled, "Wake Up Labour, Drought and Tax Have Put Farming in Crisis." And I think that headline tells you all you need to know about what's in that piece, and I recommend everybody to read that.
Farming also in the Financial Times, British farmers brace for a second year of poor harvest. Now, this doesn't really tell us anything that we don't know, but the fact that it is in the FT means that it's making headlines in the wider world. So farming again in the news. British farmers, the yield on British wheat estimated to be 7.3 tonnes per hectare this season, 9% below the 10-year average. Some revised figures there from the Agriculture and Horticulture Development Board. Hugh, what have you seen?
A similar vein, really. This was on Sky, actually, last week. And it was UK criminally unprepared to feed itself in crisis. Our diets may have to change, was their top line. It went on to say Britain's food supply is in trouble. Experts say the UK can't feed itself properly in a disaster scenario, and disasters are becoming more and more common. And then it quotes Tom Bradshaw from the NFU, and it also has Professor Tim Benton in. And fair play to Sky. I don't know what's spurred them on to do it. I don't know whether there was someone put a press release out along these lines, but they've gone out and they've reached out and talked to all these people. And again, it's utterly telling us what all of us involved in farming know already and have been ranting on at the government about for years and years. And it's just like this perfect storm is coming together. It's like last week when we talked about the inflation figures. Now, why is this inflation spiky? Because some foodstuffs are really spiky on inflation. And why are they spiky on inflation? Because you can't grow them, because there's no rain, or because of other issues caused by climate. So yes, this is just going to be a trend that will build until, and even if you did all the lovely things tomorrow and made it nice, it's still, unless you can manipulate the weather, it's going to take years to make the system more resilient.
Now, not only can we not feed ourselves, the drought weather means that livestock producers are having to go further afield to get their hands on forage, hay and straw, which is being imported into the UK from continental Europe. Well, earlier I caught up with hay and straw importer Philip Judge, who's in France, heading for Calais with a wagon load of hay and straw ready to be imported into the UK. And I asked Philip what the market's looking like with autumn just around the corner.
So we have been trading in the hay and straw job for over 38 years. We really suspected with a very dry spring that there was going to be potentially problems. And obviously we keep in a very close contact with our suppliers and stuff, and they were telling us that, Philip, this grass is not growing, especially on the wolds and the thinner ground and stuff like that. There was definitely a east-west divide as well. Definitely over central England and the west, in the east was looking like there was going to be problems, it's come to fruition. Some of my best suppliers are 500-600 tons down. One farmer in Oxfordshire hasn't got any hay when he normally supplies me with 600 big bales. So it's a real teller, if you like.
I mean, the situation is not so good in Europe either, but 38 years in the trade, you're able to bring it in. Are you able to meet demand in the UK?
Obviously doing a test load today just to check the paperwork's all good and things like that. Potentially, yes, we can. We will try and source. If you're hungry, you'll go looking for food, and that's what we're doing. We're not there to undermine anything at all in the UK. We're there to support the UK, and basically, if we can offer. Ironically, at the moment, I'm near Calais, and it's absolutely pouring with rain, which is great. We need to see, rain. But the elder people in my industry certainly have told me that this is a worse year than '76 for fodder. So.
And can you talk prices at all?
They're above £200 a tonne for big square bale hay. We'll be nudging £300 a tonne by Christmas, I would envisage. So it's a big cost, but big bales are obviously the way to go. Little bales, small bale hay is trading anywhere between retail end £7 to £8 a bale plus. Depending on quality and stuff like that, So, prices are, but you've got the perfect storm, Johann. You've got the perfect storm with inflation really taking hold and the severe lack of forage. So prices have had to go up, and we feel that prices have gone up 35% in the last 3 or 4 years just due to inflation. So prices do look expensive, but if you take the 35% inflation off, they're okay-ish at the moment, So, but I personally think in the UK, the money won't buy it. There is definitely fodder in Scotland. There is definitely fodder in Ireland. There is definitely fodder in the West Country. But how long that will last? And, obviously these areas I've mentioned have got livestock themselves. So usually what's produced in Scotland stays in Scotland. What's produced in, very little gets, moved around the country from those areas because they are predominantly stock areas. But, if I had a crystal ball, I'd be a very wealthy man. But short term, we just feel that we've got some existing contracts that we need to service, and if we can look to Europe in the bigger picture, where we'll go, there's hay to be had in Germany. We've had a particularly very busy harvest. Barley straw is massively short in supply, which is obviously a good feeding straw normally. Oat straw, we seem to be selling a lot of oat straw for feed, and I'm encouraging people to feed oat straw because it's cost effective, and will get you out of trouble. So oat straw will definitely feed. And we've seen it before, especially for big horse areas. But I think with the forecast September being an Indian summer again, it's only a forecast. It's not anything else. We could have looked for a little bit of, maybe second, third cuts or something like that. But I think the rain comes now. All it'll do is just make things green. It won't give us any length or direction. So, and what people have got to remember, this is August. It's not March, April, May time next year. This is August, 2025.
Well, look, Philip, safe journey back into the UK, and I'm sure your services are going to be much in demand this summer going into autumn.
It's very hard work importing it, to be fair. With the work of the paperwork with Brexit. Brexit is obviously doing none of us any favours whatsoever. And obviously, as you can probably see by the picture on Facebook, we have to, sheet in and make the standards for the boat, so which is also hard work, But as I say, it's going to be challenging times, but problems are just challenges. That's all we try and do. So we'll see. We're trying our hardest. We might not be getting it right, but we're trying.
Philip, thank you. Thanks for talking to us here on the Farmers Weekly podcast. It's Philip Judge from haysales.co.uk. So, Hugh, Philip Judge there, bringing hay and straw in from the continent. France this week, he's saying he's probably out to Germany after he's delivered this load into the south of England. This is a situation that is not going to go away, is it?
No, this is going to keep the rumbling. Not surprisingly, the abject lack of forage on some farms as we head into this winter. The rain is sweeping through at the moment. It started. We've got some rainfall forecast for this weekend. It could be that we end up with a cheeky cut of silage in late September, mid-October. It has happened before, but the quality won't be good. But the fact that people are already through their first cut on some farms on silage, for example, it's huge, and it's going to have a huge impact. And as we've said before, it's the fact that it's affecting areas of the country which aren't used to drought. The impact of it is just so much worse. So, yeah, this is not going to go away.
And those hay and straw prices only going one way at the moment. You heard Philip talking numbers there. Hugh, what are the other market prices doing?
Thank you, Johann. Finished their dead weight this week, drops back 0.5p. 643 is the average on the dead weight. The live weight is 362.9. That's dropped back about 5p on the week. As we head to the sheep rings, we've seen a bit of easing in prices. We had some processors this week dropping their bid price by 50p, saying that there's oversupply or they're not selling enough lamb. The headline price, SQQ, 734.9. So it's back pretty much 20p on the week. So on the ground, as I said, it's a bigger chunk that it's dropped back. The live price drops back 17p, 310 dead this week, back from 327.1. last week. So, yeah, just nudging out on those sheep values, which, to be fair, have been pretty phenomenal all the way through this season, as they were last season. They've been a dead straight line. But just a bit of change there, as we've seen. Pig prices, 207.9. That has gone up 0.1 of a penny. The arable prices, again, it's a tale of doom. Feed wheat, 160.4. That is back £1 on the week. Milling wheat is 179.50. That's back about £2 on the week. Feed barley drops another £1, £139.90. I was talking to someone earlier today, yesterday, and they were telling me one of their neighbours in Sussex had been offered 127 ex-farm for barley. So barley is on the floor. Oilseed rate 392.30. That is back about 50p, so that's not too bad. Feed peas 222.60. That's gone up a tenner. Feed beans go up £2, 213.9. Fuel is, well, it was cheap. It's just edged up a couple of pence. Red diesel this week on the Wednesday morning ring round is 67.2 pence per litre. That has gone up nearly 2p on the week.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're up before sunrise during the busiest time of year and still on your feet 12 hours later. The V12 Cotswold dealer boot is made for days like this, built for comfort, safety and strength to handle whatever the day throws at you. They've been independently tested by Sartre against the market-leading boot, proving they're not only the toughest, but outperforming the competition in long-lasting durability as well. No gimmicks, just boots that do their job, so you can do yours. Now that's fair dinkum. Use the code podcast20 for 20% off your first order. Visit v12footwear.com to place your order now. The V12 Cotswold gets tougher with age.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And finally, tractor drivers are being reminded to stay safe on the road by making sure their vehicle is roadworthy and keeping off their mobile phones. The Project Grain Store initiative is the brainchild of Cambridgeshire policeman Tom Ferret, who says too many road accidents involve younger farmers and farm workers.
When we started looking at the figures for your normal stuff, your cars, your motorbikes, your lorries are coming down in Cambridge. The one that has stayed and remained the same is the collisions involving agricultural vehicles, which is roughly sort of 32 killed or seriously injured on Cambridgeshire's roads a year through agricultural vehicles.
So farmers and farm workers, what you're saying, Tom, is that they're more likely to be involved in an accident.
The figures are that 55% of the collisions involving an agricultural vehicle is down to the fault of the agricultural vehicle driver, and then 45% is down to your other road users.
And your message, Tom, is that tractor drivers should be doing their daily checks before they go out on the public highway, on the road, but also that farmers and farm workers should be using their common sense and asking themselves whether they should be doing what they're doing, whether what they're driving is safe.
100%. So mostly the project, you can get lost in the legislation on this. I've gone round and round in circles on the legislation, and what it sort of boils down to is common sense. So what I'm trying to teach to young farmers is become that little person sat on their shoulder saying, what does your guts feel about this? Do you feel right going out on the road like this? And just to do something about it. Because I watched hours and hours of footage of collisions involving tractors, and most of them could have been fixed easily with just a little bit of common sense.
And that, Tom, is when you're driving, keep off your mobile phone. But before you even get into the driver's seat, make sure that you've checked that the vehicle is legally roadworthy and safe.
So we go down the maintenance route of making sure your vehicle is fit for road use, the same as what we have to do every time we take a police car out on the roads. And then just common sense of when in your stomach whether you feel if it feels dodgy or not when you're out on the road. I've done it plenty of times myself in my younger days in a tractor, going down the road with Cambridge rollers or with a seed drill on the back, of just thinking, should I have the amber lights on? Should I not have lights? Should I have someone stood out in front in a vehicle with amber flashing lights pushing people across? Just go with your gut, and usually then it'd be fine.
That's Tom Ferret from Cambridgeshire Police. Hugh, Louise, we know agriculture has an appalling safety record. What Tom is saying is that simple measures can often make big improvements. Do your daily checks, trust your gut instinct as to whether something is right or wrong, and for goodness sake, keep off your mobile phone, Louise.
Absolutely. I mean, this safety is we've talked about it before, haven't we? I'm sure we'll talk about it again. Top priority. And the roads are very, very busy. And so anybody doing anything that they shouldn't be doing, whatever vehicle they're driving, to be honest with you, they need to stop. And, we do see an awful lot of mobile phone use behind the wheel. I don't think we only see that amongst tractor drivers. I think we see that amongst van drivers and everybody else. But it needs to stop, really. And everybody needs to get home every evening in the same shape as they left the door in the morning.
And Hugh, I know this is something that really riles you, as I say. The tractor drivers sitting up there in what is effectively almost a greenhouse on wheels, very visible to everybody. People can see what you're doing. There's no hiding place, is there?
No, it's just ridiculous, and it does wind me up. And I tell you, it's like we've been out there. We've all been out there ever since I've joined Young Farmers, defending farming, going out, appearing in media interviews, doing the stuff we do here. We're defending farming constantly against attack from various people that don't like it. Most people, thankfully, do now, thanks to all the hard work we've done over the last 30, 40 years, defending farming. And then some absolute, and I can't say it on the radio, comes along with a mobile phone glued to his ear, driving way over the speed limit on a blooming great tractor with a trailer behind. And we look like absolute, and I can't say that on the radio either. That's what really winds me up. And any employer employing someone, if they catch them with a phone on a tractor like that, they just want to, it sends me wild. It's bad enough. You're trying to defend everything and then that happens. So no, don't do it. And if you're young, and you're probably not because I'm too old and gittish for you to listen to me, but if you are young and you're listening to this in your tractor, don't use your phone. Use the hands-free if you've got to do anything. It's just an awful thing. It's a terrible shop window.
Yeah, stay off your mobile phones and do your daily safety checks. If you want to know what those safety checks are, especially when towing a trailer, you can go to tillypass.co.uk. They're all there for you, and stay safe out on the road. Right, that's it for this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. Thank you very much for listening. We do hope you've enjoyed what you've heard. As always, if you have, please do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like what you've heard, please do leave us a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with all the latest news, views and analysis of all the big stories in UK agriculture. But for now, until next week, I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Thank you for listening. This episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast was brought to you in association with KWS.